Thank you all for spending a little time with us this afternoon. Like I said, many of you guys have spoken to us here at CleanSlate prior to this meeting. For those that haven't, CleanSlate, we are a platinum IBM business partner, so the highest tier business partner with IBM. We are a software reseller for IBM. And have the ability to not only sell the IBM software portfolio, but also help with consulting, implementation, managed services, any of those sort of things as you guys are interested in some of these solutions and implementing them. We're obviously here to help. We partner very closely with IBM on the security portfolio, which is part of the reason why we're here today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our guest of the hour, Chip Crane, to go through thinking like a CISO. I think we're going to start with kind of the cost of a data breach. We're all going to get a little nervous. It's going to drive us to have a little drink. So I think we're going to, try the whiskey at that point, and then we're going to go into a little virtual whiteboarding session. So with that, Chip, thank you and welcome.
All right. Well, Brandon, thank you very much for having me. Team, thank you very much for being here. I know there's a million things you could be doing today. I do know that we bribed you with whiskey, so I'm cognizant of that, and that's okay with me. I'm not sure what the rules are, but I know that if I had whiskey in front of me and I were on this webinar, I'm not sure anybody could stop me from starting to drink whenever you wanted to drink. So we'll start with that lever for you. So just 10 seconds on myself, just so that kind of sets the stage for some of the things we're going to talk about. I have the security tech team for the Americas, so I have the luxury to lead that for IBM. It's a lot of fun. And prior to coming to IBM, I reported directly to the CISO of a global retailer. And that really afforded me the luxury to understand the nomenclature, the taxonomy, frankly, the rules of the road, if you will. I was even able to build a CISO network, et cetera, so that when I joined IBM uses me to basically go out and talk to CISOs all the time. So I literally travel the Americas doing that. I'm actually coming to you today from São Paulo, Brazil. Obviously, that's not where I'm stationed. You can tell by the accent, that's not where I originally come from, but I had the luxury to be down here today. So I say that again, just to say that what I want to talk to you about today, it really was curated by me talking to CISOs and helping the CISOs navigate their world, because I had been in their world, right? So that's really what we want to talk about. And one of the first things that I normally get asked is Chip, we got lots of technology that we want to do, but how do I get budget? How do I have meaningful conversations with, my CFO, my chief financial officer, my CRO, my chief risk officer, or frankly, anybody else that has budget, right? How do we help them understand the needs of security? Well, let me first of all tell you what I did wrong when we started this. So I think every one of us on this call has probably heard something about the cost of a data breach, right? And I'll admit, I use this. IBM comes out with it. It comes from the Ponyman study. We just launch it typically in about the April timeframe, I think. And I've been known for many years to be able to take that information and then go have conversations with CISOs and sometimes CFOs and CROs. But honestly, what I would do is I would say, hey, the cost of the data breach is 4.24. And I've done that for so long, frankly, even to ad nauseum, trying to help the CISO get budget, that I realized my CFOs were basically just writing down, what that number is. Chip, what's the number this year? 4.24. Okay, I got it. Almost as though they were just putting it as a line item in the budget, right? Now, before you think to yourself, well, if they're going to put 4.24 in the budget, then I should just go and ask for that 4.24. Well, let me help all of us. That's not how this works, right? First of all, if they were even putting the 4.24, they would say, well, there's a chance if we get breached, I would spend the 4.2. But if I hand it to you, I'm guaranteed to spend the 4.2. So it doesn't work quite that way. And then honestly, they're probably going to say something to the effect of, hey, there's a 1 in 4 or a 1 in 10 chance I'm going to get breached. So they're going to do a probability number on that. And the number comes down really low. Like if it's 1 in 10, then that's a $420,000 kind of thing for the line item of the budget. So my point is that I wasn't being very effective with that conversation about the cost of a data breach. However, I didn't want to give up on that because it did help get some traction. So I started realizing that we weren't breaking the number down enough for them. So I started having conversations about, hey, Mr. CFO, Mr. CRO, do you realize that 1.6 of that 4.2 is just sunk cost, right? Because it's lost business because you weren't available because of the breach, or it's lost reputation, or it's those kind of things. And oh, by the way, we've got it listed as 1.6 because that's what the study finds, but that's a 1-year loss, right? If you took a brand image hit, that may cost you more than 1.6 over the lifespan of a couple of years, right? So that at least got their attention a little bit. But then I started having the conversation about the fact that 23% of the breaches were actually ransomware. Now, I've been in security long before it was cool. So I've unfortunately been in the room when bad things were happening, right? A lot of us have. Well, 10 years ago, man, it made you sick and you felt horrible. But the truth is, if you would have went down to the loading dock while that was going on, there's a really good chance they were still loading and unloading trucks. If you went to the billing department, they were probably still billing people. And I assure you, if there was a healthcare organization, they were still seeing patients, right? With ransomware, it's not that way anymore, right? There's a really good chance if you're under a ransomware attack, you're not loading and unloading trucks because you have no bill of materials, right? You don't know what anything's supposed to be. You're almost certainly not billing people. And believe it or not, in a lot of healthcare organizations, yes, you're still physically seeing patients, but you really don't have that information that you should have in front of you to be able to take proper care of that. So that does tend to get their attention a lot more. And oftentimes I say is, hey, look, the 4.24, that's an average number. That doesn't mean that that's a limit, or that doesn't mean that that's your number. It actually is just a gross average of all the people that got breached and what that cost was, or all the people that were surveyed, got breached. So I like to say, look, how much revenue did you guys bring in last year? Well, let's just for the sake of it, say it was $10 million or $50 million. Well, in theory, during ransomware, that's pretty much what you've got on the line, all your revenue, because you've been ground to a halt. I also like to point out that 20% of the breaches were caused by compromised credentials. Now, as all of us as security professionals, do we have ways to mitigate, compromised credentials? Yeah, we've been doing that for years, right? So it's not like this is some unfathomable thing or something that we have no idea what's going on. And I have found a lot of times that the CFOs and the CROs tend to believe, or feel like anyway, oh, it's just something that randomly happens. It's not really true, right? We all as professionals know there's a lot that can be done to start to mitigate that. So then I very quickly take them into the concept of, when you even break that down and we take a quick look at, say, insider threats, 14% of those are compromised users. Again, we know how to handle that. 62% are careless users. We certainly know how to mitigate that. And then frankly, 23%, that's malicious users. Yep, they're more nefarious, no doubt about it. But you know what? We even have mitigation strategies for that. And then I help them with the concept of, hey, look, the average number of days to contain an insider breach is 77. And almost 90% of them take more than 30 days to figure out and start to contain. Well, if you look to the far right over there, you're going to realize the breaches that last for more than 30 days. Yeah, that's an $8.85 million piece there. So hopefully what you're grasping here, and I don't really want you to copy my numbers or anything like that. In fact, I deliberately don't update this with the 2022 because I want to show the pattern, not the individual numbers, because your mileage may vary depending on which industry you're in. But my point is that I'm trying to give them something to anchor to as far as the cost of a data breach. So it seems daunting because, we're talking about 8.85 million and 4.24, et cetera, But the reality is that's kind of their language, if you will. So I tend to use this with them. We tend to get some anchorage on it. And then I like to be able to show them this slide. Now, what this slide is this is talking about zero trust. And if you'll notice, our average was 4.24, as we said multiple times now. But look at on the far right for those industries that haven't started any kind of zero trust. Their average cost is 5.04. Well, that quickly tells you there's an $800,000 tax in not starting zero trust. And if you can get it implemented to a mature stage, you can see that your average is reduced all the way to 3.2, right? So a $1.8 million difference there. So again, this is really us as the security team and the CISO team really helping that CRO and that CFO be able to do the right calculations in their head. So that's really our goal for that. Now, it's still terrifying. 3.2 is still a lot of money. I understand that. So I also like to give them a little bit, I don't do this too much with them, but I do like to give them an idea of what the problem space is. Now, this isn't going to be new to a lot of you guys, but we realize that we as the security professionals, we got to deal with identity and access management. We have to worry about threat intelligence, network security, mobile security, endpoint security. The hits just keep on coming, right? Our problem space is very big. It's very broad. And frankly, each one of these, even as I click through, these are all major domains, right? So these aren't just something, oh, I just need to go and secure the mainframe, right? We all know that there are multiple tenants to even that inside of it. So the reason I want to make sure we point this out is when we come to them and we talk about, zero trust, let's say, we have to remember that zero trust, there's 10 principles to that. So when we put that on this little chart here, you realize that you're not talking about a single domain even, you're talking about 10 different domains. So it's kind of frustrating when I talk to customers and they're all pushing zero trust. Zero trust is a much bigger thing than a single product, a single solution, a single service. It's a much bigger thing. And oh, by the way, you have to be able to bring all that together for zero trust to really be effective and helpful, right? And I don't know how many people we have here that are serving the federal government or work for the federal government, but I will tell you, you're probably aware that President Biden signed an executive order in 2021, and then they've updated that in 2022. I'm sure they'll be doing that again in 2023. And honestly, previous presidents had signed an executive order for cybersecurity, but this one had teeth and it had a lot more, shall we say, direct tenets inside of it. And one of those was it directly called out zero trust. So if you're going to get federal budgeting, you have to be implementing zero trust. And frankly, not just zero trust, they also added on several other pieces to that. And these are those called out for you. And of course, for you to be able to report on all that, you've got to be able to bring that together for the executive order. So again, the cost is high and the problem space is really big. So I think that's why Brandon wanted us to start drinking about now. He felt like I was going to have you driven to drink about now. So with that, I'll turn it over. We can break open the bottles for a second here, and Brandon, I'll give it back to you for a few minutes.
Yeah, perfect. So I want to give the floor now to Carolyn Calhoun, who is here today from Treaty Oak Distillery to talk a little bit about those nice packages that were delivered to your house.
Hi guys, thank you so much for having me on today. I was thinking about dad jokes. You guys had some good ones, but I don't know if this is a dad joke or not, but why did Sally fall off the swing?
I don't know. Why did Sally fall off the swing?
She didn't have any arms.
She didn't have any.
Wow, Caroline. I'm glad you told that joke and I didn't tell that joke.
Okay. Anywho, yes, my name is Carolyn. I work for Treaty Oak Distilling, which is located in Dripping Springs, Texas. It's just about 25 minutes outside of downtown Austin. We have a huge 25-acre ranch where we distill all of our products. We also make gin, and we have a restaurant there as well. So if you're ever in Texas and you find yourself in the Hill Country, definitely swing by our property. We have a great restaurant. We do tours, and it's a really fun time. There's also live music quite often. Regarding specifically the bourbon that y'all are drinking today, it is the Whiskey Myers Red-Handed Bourbon. Is that correct?
It's the red-handed. Yep.
Awesome. Okay. So the red-handed is a special line at Treaty Oak. So we offer 4 different whiskeys in total. Our flagship bourbon is called the Ghost Hill Bourbon. We offer a different bourbon called the Day Drinker Bourbon. And then our Whiskey Myers Red-Handed Bourbon is actually a Kentucky bourbon. So while our Ghost Hill Bourbon and our Day Drinker Bourbon are fully made grain to glass at our distillery in Dripping Springs, the Red-Handed is a line that we partnered with a distillery in Kentucky called Bardstown Distillery to produce for us. So it's actually a super common practice in the alcohol industry to source your liquor from other places, or other distilleries, I should say. However, it's not as common to be honest about the fact that you didn't make it yourself. So what we did with our Red-Handed is we're just very upfront and honest about the fact that, hey, this is a product that we think is great, but it's not something that we actually made. We partnered with someone else to distill it for us. We were caught red-handed stealing it. It's the that's the play on that. So being from Kentucky, it's actually kind of a traditional Kentucky bourbon in the sense that it has a pretty high corn count, some rye, and then a little bit of barley. Specifically, it has 70% corn, 21% rye, and then the rest is barley. It is aged for 2 years there in Kentucky at the Bardstown Distillery. And then it's brought to our distillery in barrels and bottled on site. So the entire distillation process, the mashing, the fermentation, the distillation, and the aging all happens there in Kentucky. And then we just bottle it by hand at our property. Super sweet, in my opinion. It has a lot of peanut butter flavors. And yeah, it's a nice 2-year bourbon.
Nice.
That is very good.
Thank you. Some common things about bourbon that are often like misconstrued is that one, bourbon has to be from Kentucky. Although you are drinking Kentucky bourbon, not all bourbon is from Kentucky. That's why we have bourbon here in Texas. So what makes bourbon bourbon is, one, it has to be distilled in the United States, not just Kentucky, as they would have you believe. 2 is that it has to have at least 51% corn in the mash bill, which is all the grains that make up the whiskey itself. And one of the other main things is that it has to be aged for a minimum of 12 months in a first use white American oak barrel. And now those oak barrels do come mainly from Kentucky, the Northeast. That's where white American oak grows the best, and so that's where it's mostly sourced from. But it is very common, and whiskey is alive and well here in Texas. So
Very cool. Thank you so much, Carolyn. I tried it. It's delicious. For those of you on the call, not on camera, I hope you guys are also sipping on that and continue to sip on it through the remainder of the presentation. Thank you, Carolyn.
of course,
Yeah.
I hope you guys enjoy. Thank you for having me on. Look us up on Instagram at Treaty Oak, or find us. You can go to our website, Treaty Oak Distilling, and order directly to your house. Try our actual Texas bourbon. I highly recommend it.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Carolyn. All right, Chip, back to you, my friend.
All right. So first, let me challenge everybody that, just continue to drink. The more you drink, the better this presentation is going to get. So we'll just put it to you that way. All right, team. Yeah, there you go. So, all right, let's jump back in. Let me start with a whiteboard, because, one of the questions is that, Chip, you've just given us doom and gloom. How can you help us not be doom and gloom anymore? Well, let me take you a little bit further down the rabbit hole before we get there. But I promise to bring you back on a positive, optimistic note by the end of the day. First of all, when we, and as IT, we think about what we have, our single asset really is data, right? And yes, from a security perspective, we may not know where all that data is, but if I'm honest with you, and if we're honest with ourselves, really even the business team doesn't always know where the data is. And that's really the whole purpose of us building apps that were specifically designed to know where the data is, build a query, go get that, no matter where it is, right? But that too also sits on an app server somewhere, right? Either on-prem in our data center or out in the cloud in a data center. And the data is really only useful once we get it out to the end user. So now I would stipulate, and I've been doing this for a while, so I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. I would stipulate that this is 98% of the projects you've worked on in the last few years. This is their logical architecture, and it's probably the logical architecture of 98+% of the projects you've got on the drawing board right now, right? Well, so if this is our logical architecture, and we can all, just agree with me for the moment, my CTO used to look at me like I was crazy when I asked for more budget. He was like, Chip, this is a very, very simple logical architecture, man. If you don't mind, how about you just put a padlock on that for me? And this really shouldn't be this challenging, right? Well, what do we all know, right? We know this is still very, very challenging. And we know that, as a CISO, right, as a mental CISO, at least for the moment, that this gets replicated over and over and over again consistently, and not even always with our knowledge that it gets replicated with, right? And on top of that, when we talk about the data, well, you know what? The data may be on-prem, but the data itself may be out in the cloud. And then frankly, it could be spread across multiple clouds for that matter. And that app, oh, absolutely. That app is probably out in the cloud, and it's probably spread across multiple clouds. And if that wasn't challenging enough as the CISO or as the security team, I got to ask myself, where are my users these days? Oh, that's right. They're spread across the world. So they're traversing some form of infrastructure that, quite frankly, is spread all over the cloud as well, right? Now, as a security professional, I see all these challenges, but then I've got to make sure that I always remember that I've still got to figure out the challenge of exactly who is this that's being presented to us, right? Is this an employee? Is this a contractor? Is this a client, right? Or a customer? And frankly, what exactly should they get access to? So I got to be able to do that as well. And of course, as we know, that's spread across the cloud as well. So, as much as my CTO wanted to believe this was super simple, right, as a logical architecture, the reality is this is extremely complicated. Our CISOs and our security professionals, they're not playing checkers here, they're playing chess, right? And I get the luxury to mentor a fair amount of CISOs. And I like to tell them, well, lucky for you that you have the job now. But the thing you got to remember about the job is you have a job that people are actually out to get you. It's not just you being paranoid. Because the truth is there are a lot of nefarious people that are trying to look just like my good people or my good who's, if you will. And they're trying to emulate those. They're trying to make me believe that they're the good who and I should allow them in, right? So it's not just about chess. It's really kind of that 3D chess model. And oh, by the way, if all this isn't enough, now the business comes to me and says, hey, Mr. CISO, I want to be able to take all of our applications. I want to be able to dice that up into little cubes, and I want to be able to use microservices, right? And Kubernetes. And I really want to be able to provide this so elastic that it can just go absolutely anywhere and it can just be spread everywhere. Well, before you think I'm anti-cloud or I'm anti-microservices, I'm not. I'm actually pro both of those. But you have to be realistic, right? You have to understand that this is more and more complexity that we have to worry about as the security professional. Because every time you create a new instance of this microservice and it handles some secure data, right? We got to make sure that when we collapse that, we've got to make sure that we erase that. And in some cases, in some of my DoD style clients, we have to make sure that we actually scrub that. Right. So all of this just provides more and more complexity. Okay. Take a drink for me. Take a breath for me. All right. And then let's start to think like a CISO. Okay. So the first thing I want to start with is, and this is going to challenge some of our thinking, but trust me, I believe I'm right on this. You, and we're all CISOs on this call for the moment. All right. So just mentally step into that CISO role for me. As the CISO, your job is not, I repeat, is not to figure out how to solve or secure the organization, okay? It's really not. The truth is your job is to figure out what needs to be done to secure it. And the reason it's so hard for me to get most of my new CISOs to understand this is a lot of us, and I did too, I came up through the ranks, and we want to be able to provide practical solutions. I get it. I totally understand it. But the reality is that limits the way we think. And we can't be limited as CISO. We've got to figure out what the organization needs to be able to be secure. Now, how do we take care of the how problem? Well, honestly, is you have a whole staff for that, right? That's what the rest of the security staff's there to do, is to help figure out the how. You have solution providers like IBM, right? We've got tons of solutions to be able to help you solve this problem. You've got great service providers and business partners like Brandon and CleanSlate to be able to help you solve this problem. So the how doesn't need to rest on the shoulders of the CISO. Yep, we're accountable for making it happen. He or she is 100% accountable. I'm not trying to, abscond that, but it will tell us we don't always have to be able to figure that out. So when I work with CISOs, I talk to them about what would you really want to solve in this problem first. And normally I would do this very interactive. We've got a limited time today. And besides that, I think you've probably been drinking enough that we may not want to open up all the mics. Who knows yet? But I would say, and I would encourage, look, let's start with that. Physical office, I can then allow you to have access to that information full time, right? Or maybe I just decide that executive salaries are only viewable between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. My point is that I want to be able to write very specific policies as a CISO. And maybe if you're in R&D and you average 20 documents a week to viewing, and all of a sudden on Wednesday, you're at 30 documents, so that's a 50% increase. I want the security team alerted, right? And if you were to get to 40 documents, that's 100% increase. I really want to disable your access for the moment. And you know what? Maybe you've been assigned a special project. Well, great. Well, we can easily put that back in place. But that's a much easier conversation to have with the board that, oh, yep, you know what? We hindered production a little bit today versus all of our R&D data got exfiltrated, right? So those are the things I want to be able to do. And you know what? Now that I think about it, I know it's greedy as a CISO, but if you logged in from New York at noon, and then you provided me valid credentials, and then an hour later, you also provided me valid credentials from the West Coast, it's highly unlikely you made that trip in an hour. So I want to be able to disable both accounts, right? I want to be able to do things like that as a CISO. Well, okay, so I guess our next step would be on the app. So how do I harden the app? And I think that's as simple as I want a team and a tool that's basically going to be able to try what a hacker would try. Let's take the app and let's inspect every element of that app and let's try exactly what a hacker would try. Let's do text box. Let's go dump some cross-site scripting into it. Let's dump some SQL injection pieces in it. Oh, it's a checkbox. Let's go do what a hacker would do to the checkbox. And any success I have, let the security team know, let the app dev team know, right? Those are the things I want done for us on the app world. And whether we bought the app or we built the app or we're SaaSing the app, if you will, I don't really care. It's my job as the CISO to protect the organization and our data. So you know what? I want to be able to turn the tool loose on every bit of that. So then when we talk about the infrastructure, and I'm not going to say this is easy. I should probably give you a little caveat here. There's a difference between simple and easy, right? It's simple to lose weight. You eat less and you exercise more. That's very difficult for me, at least anyway. So the infrastructure piece is simple. I really want to be able to take a tool and I want to plug it into the wall and I want to plug it into the network. And I want it to listen to all my network traffic. I mean, all of it, even though that it's not always on my network. I want to be able to capture that and compare that to known threat signatures and known threat vectors. And frankly, if it finds something, I want it to take some action. Maybe that's as simple as, you know what, we'll quarantine a laptop. Maybe it's a server that we can now recognize missed a patch cycle. And you know what, we're going to push that to a remedial network. Right? I may want to be able to do things like that. I may even want to get as robust as sub-segmenting the network if I really have to make that happen. Those are the things I want the tool to do. But you know what? A known threat signature and a known threat vector means somebody paid a 0-day price. I don't want to be that person that has to pay the 0-day price. So idealistically anyway, I wish that this tool had 2 dials on the front that basically said, I as a CISO could turn 1 dial to say 2.5%. And if the environment changes more than 2.5%, then I want it to send an alert to the security organization. And I want the other dial for me to be able to dial to 3.1%. And if the environment changes by 3.1%, obviously I've already alerted security. I'm going to alert security again. And frankly, I'm going to start acting like there's been a breach, like I've captured a known threat signature, known threat vector, and I'm going to start taking action. That's what I want as a CISO. Now, that may not happen right out of the box. It may take a little while for that tool to be able to figure out what good looks like in my environment. But that's the challenge I want to provide, right? Because I think with the heuristics there, we can prevent a tremendous amount of 0-day attacks. Now, when we get to the who and the what, I really, again, it's simple, not always easy, but I really just want to plug into authoritative sources. Let me plug into the HR database for all my employees. Let me plug into a contractor database for the contractors. Let me plug into our customer relationship management tool for the actual clients. And you know what? Those should be authoritative sources enough that I should be able to rely on them to provide me the role of what that is, right? So if it's an employee, it's an HR person. Okay, well, that translates to these exact 5 pieces of access that I want the tool to be able to go in and get. And I even wanted to be able to reconcile what's out there today compared to what it should get and make sure that those two match, right? Same for my contractors, same for my customers. You know, you're a bronze customer, you're a silver customer, you're a gold customer. Each one of those should come with different levels of access. And I want the tool smart enough to be able to do that. I even want the tool smart enough to be able to say, you know what, this is the lunchroom menu. So you know what, fine, free for all on that. This particular application is actually R&D. So therefore, I want a human to have to approve this without question. I also want it to be able to say that, you know what, this is our real estate, our finance app. I want a human to have to approve it. And to be honest, I want that recertified every 30, 60, 90 days, whatever I decide as the CISO. That's what I really want. All right. So let's move on, because it's great that we can cover all those pieces, but we've still got to recognize the fact that the endpoint, that's where the data is going to live, at least temporarily. So I've got to make sure that I protect that, because if I protect everything else and not that, we're only as strong as our weakest link. Well, most of the organizations don't own all of their equipment anymore. So I've really, whether I own it or whether I don't, I've really still got to be able to write the policies that say things like, thou shalt have a password. Thou password must be this long and must be this strong. And I even want to be able to say, thou shalt have antivirus software. I want to be able to say things like, thou shalt not have TikTok, and thou shalt not have WhatsApp, or whatever, right? Whatever the policies that I, as the CISO, deem necessary, that's what I want to have to be able to enforce. I also want to be able to draw a boundary around, really inside that, right? A container, not containerization like microservices, but a container that says, look, if my business data is going to exist here, it's going to exist inside this container. And I can wipe this container whenever I would like to. And I really even want to be able to say, I can wipe the entire device that should get lost or stolen, right? So those are things I think would be not just ideal, but they'd be necessary, if you will. Now, what I think would be even cooler, and I know I'm getting greedy as a CISO, but how cool would it be if I were smart enough, or the system was smart enough to be able to say that, hey, Chip comes to me normally on a Windows machine, and he's not very smart, so he types 80 words a minute. But today, Chip seems to have gotten a lot smarter, because he's coming to me on a Mac, and he's typing 120 words a minute. It's probably not really Chip, right? So I really want the ecosystem so strong that it's able to say, you know what, we're going to not allow access to Chip right now, because we're not sure it's really Chip, and we're going to send a one-time password over to his phone. Well, I even want the system so good that it's going to be able to say, you know what, Chip normally holds his phone in his left hand and authenticates with his left thumb, but today it's in his right hand and he's authenticating with his his left index finger. Well, I don't want to send a one-time password to his phone, because obviously he's already holding that, or somebody's holding that anyway. So now I may want to go to a call for voice verification, or I may want to go to an email or some other form of a second factor, right? It's what I really want to be able to do, because ultimately I want to make sure that the bad who's are not successfully emulating the good who's. So that's what I want to do. So now, if I'm able to do this, I can say that, hey, I've pretty well taken care of the data area. I've pretty well taken care of the app area. I've taken care of the infrastructure, the who, the what, and the endpoint itself. Well, as we all know, that's great, but that's still a lot of information. I've got to be able to pull all that together. Well, that's where our security incident event management system would be very, very useful. And frankly, I want to be able to get each one of these reporting into that SIM system that's really going to be able to take in massive amounts of information, because this is going to generate a fair amount of traffic. And by fair, I mean millions and millions and millions of records. But now if I had that, I can now talk to my CTO, who remember thought this was simple and wanted me to just throw on a padlock for it, right? Well, now I could look at them and say, hey, I didn't just put a padlock on it, but I'm actually collecting all this information. I'm bringing it all together. So if something bad happens in our environment, I'm going to know about it, right? Well, how do you think, Target or, TJX or some of these other companies would say about if something bad happens? It's not if, Chip, it's when. So I really want to have a security orchestrated and automated response tool or team that says, look, when we find out that we've got all these millions of records and the SIM is able to collect and correlate all that and produce a single offense, I want to know what to do about it. So I want the SIM to be able to send something over to the SOAR that basically says, hey, we've got an offense and now you need to run a playbook, so that we're not trying to design that playbook on the fly, right? So that would be the goal of the SOAR. So now I can look at my CTO and say, hey, it's not ifs when something bad happens. It's actually when something bad happens. We're actually going to know about it, and we're even going to know how to respond. But you know what? I don't really want to wait on something bad. How cool would it be if I could actually do analytics on this, just like I would business data, and I become predictive, right? Oh, this series of laptops, they didn't make it on the patch schedule, perhaps. So I'm going to go ahead and set them up for next week's patch schedule, or I'm going to go ahead and put them on the mitigation network, et cetera, right? So now I can become predictive on what's going to happen. So now, It's not when something bad happens, it's just when something happens, right? So that's cool, but as I think about that, it's still in our environment. How cool would it be if I had a worldwide research organization out there that looked over thousands of environments similar to mine and maybe cross industry, maybe in my same industry, it doesn't really matter. And they did the same analytics that I would do. And believe it or not, they could actually just feed directly into my SIM new learnings, right? How cool would that be that now when I look at my CTO, not only do we have the bases covered, not only are we bringing all that together, not only do we know how to respond, we're actually getting better every single day, not just based off our environment, but when something happens in the world. So now that statement becomes when something happens all over the world, we're going to know about it and we're going to get a little bit better. And really now I'm a CISO, so I don't want to give carte blanche here, but how cool would it be if I could even take learnings from that worldwide research organization and maybe update policies for my endpoints, or update how I manage my user identities, or maybe, do some virtual patching, or do some different things for my entire ecosystem for this. So, wow, now if my CTO wants to have a conversation, I feel pretty good about where we sit right now. Well, that's good, but I got to tell you, I'd really like for this system itself to be able to not only recognize the problems that we're talking about, but how cool would it be if it could do something? How cool would it be if the SIM found that offense, sends it over to the SOAR, and while yes, it's going to alert the team, it's also going to be able to go out and do things. Maybe stop the application itself from taking certain logins, right? Or maybe write a new database policy, or maybe even stop select star from hitting any of the tables. Maybe we could actually apply a virtual patch based on the playbook that we decide on, or maybe even revoke an ID, right? And then actually get that ID canceled out of the revoked access all the way across wherever it's been logged on in infrastructure. Now, Mr. CTO, not only do we have the bases covered, not only are we bringing it all together, not only are we able to respond when something happens, we're actually responding at a pace so fast that before my security professionals can read about it, we've already mitigated that to a successful level. And oh, by the way, we're getting better every single day, right? All right. Well, I, as your CISO consultant for the day, I've got other things to do, so I've got to go, but I don't want to leave you without it. So how cool would it be if we had someone or something that I could put in place that would watch your environment 24/7? Now, I would need it to be very intelligent. So I would need it to consume, new security articles, 4 or 5 security articles a day. I would want it to know all about SANS, the Geeky Security Institute, right? And I would want it to be intelligent. So I would want it to consume 10 to 20 articles a day. And I would want it to know all about NIST, the government body about security standards, and consume 50 to 100 articles a day. I wanted to know all about government regulations and social media and the dark web, and I'd be able to consume 1 million articles a day, right? Well, obviously, no human's going to be able to do that. So this is where I want to bring in artificial intelligence to really be able to help us to be able to oversee our systems, and frankly, be able to turn the dials for us so that I, as the CISO, don't always have to be the one that figures that out, or I don't have to rely on my team every day to go figure that out. I want to be able to elevate my security team to where they're not just threat hunting, which is cool and fun sometimes, but how cool would it be if they could be threat hunting on a strategic system and in a strategic way, so that we're fixing the system before the hackers ever got to us, before the threat was ever presented to us. That's really where I want to be able to get to. Now, you may say, well, Chip, you've talked a lot about zero trust. Well, let's talk a little bit about zero trust here, if we could, real quick, right? In the fact that if we take the ecosystem that we're talking about right here, and we listen to what NIST has to say about zero trust, it tells us that we must have an identity and access management system. It also tells us that we need a threat packet monitoring system. It tells us that we need a data security solution system. It tells us we need an endpoint detection remediation, mobile device management, user behavior analytics. We need that SIM we talked about. We need that SOAR we talked about, and we need a SASE environment, a secure access service edge. Sorry, easy for me to say. So as you can see, those tenets do fall right on top of a little diagram here, of our worry diagram, as I'll call it sometimes. And this is the reality that as we talk about zero trust, we've got to be able to address these things, right? Well, in doing so, you might say, well, Chip, this is, this is cool, I guess. But the reality is we all want to be able to solve these things. You're not really talking to me about something new. Well, what I would like to tell you, and what I often tell my CISOs is, I just ask the question, would you like to have CleanSlate demo this for you? Because we have this today. We could actually demo everything we've talked about today on this whiteboard. We actually have the ability to demo that for you. And Brandon can help set that demo up for you, and you can see this actually working today. Now, I understand you probably have other solutions already in place. I'm not a big fan of displacing a whole lot of other products. I want my teams to be able to get the ROI out of everything they've invested in. So we want to help you do that. So the beauty is, and IBM did this, they adopted an open architecture, and I love that about them. So if you have a different solution, great, no problem. We put your solution, we just write your name of that solution in there, and we work to integrate that. And the open architecture allows us to do that. Quite frankly, I don't want to say seamlessly. I kind of hate that word. I feel like that's a euphemism. But the reality is we have that connection. I'll show you a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But the beauty is that we can actually demo this for you. And your mileage may vary if you have different pieces in there, but frankly, we typically get our customers to be very close to exactly what they're really looking for. So if I were going to demo that for you, I at least want to expose you to some of the technology that would make that happen. So QRadar Suite, we announced that at RSA, and that can include the SIEM, the SOAR, the threat packet monitoring, and the UBA, all in one solution that can take care of that for you. Now, we also have an identity and access management solution. We have a SaaS model of that. And by the way, I should go ahead and say all of this can be delivered in a on-prem scenario if you would still want that. And I, believe it or not, have a couple of customers that still want to talk about that. It can be delivered as a hybrid model. It can be delivered as a SaaS model. So all of this is something that we can provide for you. We also have our Guardian solution. That's the data security solution for that. We have our Ansible. I think that's what's coming up over there. And my boxes are moved around where I can't show you. We didn't talk about automation, and Ansible is a Red Hat product that is part of IBM. It is an automation tool. And while NIST didn't call that out, I find it very hard to believe that anybody's going to be able to implement a zero trust model, or frankly, even a sophisticated security model without a serious form of automation on that. Next up is our MOS 360. That's a mobile device management piece. And then there's SASE and there's EDR left. Now, we partner with Zscaler for the most part on our SASE, and I'll be honest, it's just been a very pleasant partnership. Our customers have gotten a lot of value out of it. It's been very useful out in the field, and so we'll continue to do that. We also, on the EDR side, we've been partnering with CrowdStrike. A lot of customers really enjoy that. I've enjoyed partnering with CrowdStrike and Zscaler a lot. It's been great. IBM did purchase about 1.5 years ago now, I think, for the Reacta EDR tool. It has some features, charms as I call it, that frankly I like better than I do CrowdStrike. I'm not going to lie, I like to be honest with everybody. CrowdStrike has some charms that I like better than I do Reacta. So it kind of depends on the customer and what suits your model. And that's my goal, is to make sure that we fit that. I'm sure that's Brandon's goal and CleanSlate's goal. Now, just to flesh this out, I'll tell you that we have X-Force, which is the threat intelligence feed. It's also the research organization that helps with the Ponymon and the cost of the CISO breach, or cost of the breach CISO report that we do annually. So that's a very messy diagram I will give you, but I hope it explains how we can take that really tough problem space that we talked about again and again, and then we're able to really clean that up. But even all of this is still talking about our internal system and how we look internally. So yes, we finally get to put a little bit of a padlock on it, right? And I would never tell him that we had all this secure. That's just not the way to answer your CTO, I guess. But this is still looking internally. I also want to introduce you to the concept of attack surface management, right? IBM purchased about 1 year ago now a tool called Randori. And its whole job is to look at our organization, your organization, but from the outside, not the inside. So literally, when we do proof of concepts, we take your email domain, and that is the only piece of information you give us. And then we plop that into the tool. We give it a couple of days to figure it out. And then it spits out this wonderful web report and actually a whole web console. And not only does it give you all of that data back, it then takes that information and is able to give you a temptation score. How useful is this to a hacker? How vulnerable is this? How many of those are out there? All of these factor in to the temptation score. And it's a very, very cool piece of science to go and deal with. Furthermore, it's actually really cool. I enjoy this anyways, because when I'm talking to CISOs and we do these POCs for them, they're like, ah, Chip, I see that on the screen, but it's not real. We didn't really leave that vulnerable. And like, actually you did. And this tool actually takes a screenshot of what happened and how we found that. And we're able to produce that for them instantly. That's part of the dashboard, right? So it's been very, very effective in actually getting them to be able to see what's going on inside their environment from the outside. So it's been very useful. Now, I do want to make sure that you get to see a more traditional slide because, you know, my hieroglyphics, as I like to call it, is not all that useful. So this is kind of that more typical slide to display with you some of that supporting foundation. And the thing I really want to point out here is the ecosystem at the bottom. All of those pieces are things that, quite frankly, as you bring up the tools, these are the things that we're going to automatically integrate with, right? And it's very powerful and very strong. Now, lastly, and I really am wrapping up here, I wanted to bring us back to this problem space, right? We saw this, we're all very familiar with the challenges, I'm sure. And, we talked about the zero trust tenants, we talked about the executive order tenants. The beauty about myself, anyway, being at IBM and working with us is we've done this for a lot of years. We've got a lot of tools in our bag, and we've been doing security since the RACF days, right? And we've been doing this in some of the most high secure environments you can imagine. And I would dare say there's no one better at bringing it together than IBM. And that's really what we're all about with the Shield. And that's what, that's the reason we want to partner with great people like CleanSlate. We want to bring those to you guys. And maybe we want them to bring us to you so that we can ultimately help you and make your organization better, cleaner, cheaper, faster. So with that, I would love to give a few minutes to questions if I could, Brandon, and Brandon, give you an opportunity to speak as this as well, sir.
No, absolutely. I was just going to say the same thing. Chip, I learned something new every time I listened to you present. That was a very, very cool whiteboarding session that I hadn't seen yet. So that was a unique way to look at it. So with that, I do want to open it up to questions if anyone on the line has any.
And the less questions we get, the more dad jokes we're going to torture you with. So just be careful there, team.
Everyone's being shy this afternoon. They're all still drinking.
I was going to say, yeah, they've got drinks in hand. They're not really interested.
I will say, one of the things that he brought up there too, the ecosystem at the bottom of that one slide, IBM and AWS signed a very strategic partnership this past year, where IBM is moving much of their portfolio into the AWS marketplace. So if any of you guys are utilizing AWS for applications or storage or data up in the cloud, there are opportunities to implement and leverage your AWS spend to acquire some of these IBM technologies that are cloud native. So would love to chat with you guys about that. One of the other things Chip mentioned is that, this was a very quick and dirty presentation. We'd love to bring this to you and do a more personal presentation. If any of this caught your eye and you want to dive a little bit deeper into the IBM solutions, or just want us to look at a kind of a security assessment, look at your current landscape and provide some recommendations on what we would recommend you guys do. IBM has a fantastic story that Chip mentioned previously that, we're never going to ask you to rip and replace your current tools. We want you to get the most out of what you're currently spending. Just let us augment what you're currently doing, strengthen that security posture so that you can sleep a little bit better at night. So I'm going to give it a couple more seconds to see if anyone has any questions.
All right, I'll fill those couple of seconds with, yeah, we have one from
got a question
here.
Well,
yeah.
it wasn't actually going to be a question. It was more of a, we have been working very hard over the last couple of years to really mature our cybersecurity and the back end pieces. And I have to admit that a lot of this we are not necessarily ready for, but it did help me to get a much better idea on some of the roadmap pieces that we've been talking about here over the last year or so as we're doing some other threat assessments. But yeah, just wanted to thank you guys for the time here, because it has been very interesting kind of looking at what that next step is going to look like.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Glad to do that.
Very cool. Well, we will be following up with each of you guys after this call. If you're just a little shy and don't want to, spew out your questions in front of everyone, we're happy to chat in a more one-on-one basis with you guys. So expect an email or a call.
There's a question
put
in
my
the
question
chat
in
if
the
you want to
chat.
take a look.
Okay.
Oh, that was Ryan. I heard a lot about products that do their best to ensure that the user attempting to access my org is real. What do those products do differently that something like YubiKey doesn't do? Can you answer that?
I'd be glad to attempt that. And first of all, let me self admit that I work with a lot of CISOs. So there's some of the technology that I'm not the best at. You'll reach the edge of my envelope on some of the technology very quickly. Let me ask you this though: how are you using YubiKey today as far as managing your user identity and your authentication? Are you just using second factor?
Well, it's not just second factor, because you have to have your YubiKey paired with your specific issued device, and then you have to touch the YubiKey. So you have to have all three things in one location, and have the password. So it's very difficult. Google implemented it, and their fake user issues went down to 0. So.
Yeah. I did not know they were at 0, but yeah. So you're actually using YubiKey correctly. I normally ask that question because I've found that a lot of people aren't necessarily using YubiKey and a lot of other products. So I'm not picking on YubiKey. They're not always using it correctly, right? So they'll use it just simply as a second factor, and there's a much more intricate validity that YubiKey can bring. It's a good tool. I'll never talk bad about YubiKey, or I try not to talk bad about any other products, but I do like to be honest with them. So we do use artificial intelligence in every one of our solutions from IBM. Every one of our security products has our AI built in. So the AI is continuing to learn each and every day. So things like the key typing rate, where the phone actually exists, all of those are things that do not have to inconvenience the user. And I get it. Some organizations care more about security than the inconvenience of the user. Some care more about the inconvenience of the user, et cetera, right? So it's really a blend of what's right for your organization on that. I think YubiKey, again, is a strong product, but I do think that our solutions do provide some things that allow a lot more flexibility than just how I'm used to using YubiKey. And again, self-admitted, I'm not a YubiKey expert at all.
Perfect. Did that answer your question, Ryan?
Mostly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'd love to dive a little bit deeper if you have some time in the coming weeks. We're happy to chat with you about that. There's another question in the chat. It says, Chip, I know you work with many CISOs. Are there any recurring themes you see when it comes to how they are prioritizing their security projects?
It's interesting because my answer to this question is evolving, and we're right there in one of those thresholds, pivot points, whatever you want to call it, inflection points. And I gotta prep this just a little bit if I can. I just heard the story not too long ago about a person that hated airplanes, right? So they would take a train wherever they went. They refused to get on a plane. They just thought the risk was too big. I'm actually a pilot myself, just a little bitty GA pilot. And of course, I'm on planes all the time. So getting on a plane is no problem for me. And a lot of the people I fly in planes with, it's no problem for them. But most of us wouldn't want to get off the plane until it actually landed, right? However, this person that was talking to me about this said they had a neighbor that had over 1,000 parachute jumps, right? So the reality is we were all managing risk. We were just managing it to our own risk tolerance. So the reality is now I see the theme is that we've got to not just manage risk like we've always said, but we have to manage risk and tailor that to the organization's risk tolerance level, right? So I think that's the big theme for me right now. And I'll admit that's still getting crafted and honed. Over the years, I've always said, oh, it's about risk, it's about risk, it's about risk. But now I'm starting to realize that, and I've got 2 CISOs that have mentored that have switched jobs over the last couple of years. And it is amazingly different how the organizations treat what it is that they do, right? So for them, it really has been about, that risk tolerance piece.
Perfect. So another question just popped up. How are you mitigating what your AI solution is learning that might be
Ah.
wrong for my organization? Learning from
That's
the
a
world
fan-
in general, right? So go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fantastic question. Let me say this up front. And IBM has just rolled out training for everyone in our organizations on AI ethics, right? So we are working very, very hard to take care of unconscious bias inside that. We're very careful with what we allow the corpuses to have access to, because as you know, and again, I'm not here to talk about bad about anything else, but if you allow your AI to just learn from the web, there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of bad information. There's a lot of bias, frankly, that's out there. So you have to be very, very careful. IBM has done a tremendous job and is putting forth a tremendous amount of effort to ensure very, very high ethics and trustworthiness in the AI. And fundamentally, that has been very key to our success in being able to build that into the rest of what we do inside the AI organization and throughout.
Excellent. Excellent. I think we've got time for one more question if anybody has one. Going once. Going twice. And sold. I think we hit the time on the mark here. We're 2 minutes until 5 o'clock on the Eastern seaboard, or in the Eastern time zone. So again, I want to thank you guys all for joining us this afternoon. I hope you enjoyed the whiskey, those of you that had an opportunity to try it. Again, we'll be following up with you guys after the fact here. We would love an opportunity to work with each and every one of you in your security journey, we'll call it. Again, we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks again.
Thanks, Brandon, for having me. Thanks, team.
Of course.